Let's graph the piecewise function. We'll start with the first equation that's in the top, x plus 1 when x is greater than or equal to 1. And I like to use point plotting to do this. The first x value that we'll use is going to be determined by the domain restriction. X is greater than or equal to 1. So we can start when x is 1. When we plug 1 into that top equation, we get 1 plus 1, which is 2. Since this is a linear function, we need an additional point to know what the slope looks like. So our next x value, again, going back to the domain restriction, x must be bigger than or equal to 1. So let's choose 2 for our next x value. Plug 2 in. 2 plus 1 is 3. So now when we go to plot these points, the first one, 1, 2, that end point, we know it's closed because we have the equality on 1. So 1, 2 is a closed point. The next point is automatically closed. 2, 3, we just needed to know what the slope looked like. So 2, 3, and like connect the dots, that goes on forever. Next, we'll look at x squared. Again, we'll use point plotting to help us sketch this graph. Let's start with the number that they give us for the domain restriction. Even though we don't have equality on the 1, we're going to start with what they give us, 1. Plug in 1 into this bottom equation. 1 squared is 1. Now we need some additional points. So let's choose something that is less than 1, say 0. 0 squared is 0. We'll get an additional point since this is a squared function. So -1, plug in -1, and we get +1. Now when we go to graph this, again, we're going to start with this endpoint 1, 1. But notice that that endpoint was not included. We don't have equality. So 1, 1 is actually an open circle. And the other two are automatically closed. The only one we're going to question whether it's open or closed is the end point. 0, 0 is there. -1, 1 is there. We just needed those to know what the shape looked like. And now we have a rough sketch of that piecewise function. In this example, we have absolute value of x when x is not 0 and 5 when x is 0. This one's actually a little bit easier than the previous example. We probably don't need point plotting on this one if we're familiar with the absolute value function. If you recall from previous videos, this is just that V shape. So we're going to have that V shape, but x cannot be 0 in that graph. So at 0, we're going to have an open circle. Otherwise, we have the familiar absolute value function, that V shape. And then the second equation, when x is 0, the y value is simply 5. So when x is 0, the y value is 5. We have a single point.